Welcome back. There's an old and pretty obvious saying around corruption. If you want to really know what is going on, you have to follow the money. And if you follow the money, you can see where the money was stolen from and where it went to and who got it. And in a way, this is really the entire story of state capture in the Guptas. Where did the money come from? It came from government. Where did it go to? And of course, this means that a major part of the Zondo Commission report is around tracing the money flows, how government money ended up in the hands of the Guptas and how much of our money went there and where that money is now. The person who testified about these money flows for the Zondo Commission was Holden from Shadow World Investigations. Of course, he'll have been going through the report as well. Paul, good afternoon to you. I can't imagine you've had much sleep. You had to trace all of this money for the Commission. How difficult was it for you to do that?
It was a pretty epic exercise, I'm not going to lie. What had happened was that I presented the Commission with evidence in the first instance based on material that I gathered from the Gupta Leaks, some of the HSBC leaks, and I presented evidence over a couple of days on that. And then after that, the Commission approached me and said, you know, we have this money flowing in South Africa. We've got somewhere with it, but we can't make heads or tails of it. Can you please come and help us? And I worked very closely with a pretty amazing team of investigators at the Commission for the better part of 6 months, just furiously trying to trace all those funds. And it ended up being a pretty enormous exercise. My final evidence bundle, plus my report was about 500 pages long, and the total evidence bundle was 15,000 pages of just tracing the money related to the Guptas. But it was a very rewarding exercise. It revealed a huge amount.
Sure. You have a lot more patience than I do. You're basically looking through people's international bank accounts. How were you able to get access to do that? You talk about the Gupta leaks, you talk about the HSBC leaks. I mean, without those, what would have happened?
I think we'd be in a very difficult position. I mean, I think what the Gupta leaks allowed us to do was get access to the Gupta Enterprises' internal ledgers, which is very important for us actually even, first of all, identifying that they were controlling entities abroad, in Dubai in particular, and then being able to trace how the money flowed through those entities and where that money came from. And without those ledgers, there's absolutely no way that we would be able to trace how the money flowed into Dubai and then back into South Africa. It sort of opened up the gates for everything that we were doing. The HSBC leaks, which then eventually became the HSB disclosures before the Commission, were also fundamental. We would have no idea how much the Guptas earned in kickbacks off the Chinese state rail contracts without those leaks. So they were really fundamental to us understanding everything.
Both of these, I mean, there are two of them, but it's still a fairly unique incident where these leaks actually happened. I mean, where information about criminal activity, and these were financial flows as a result of that, actually entered into the public domain. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's movie stuff.
It really is. I mean, the Gupta leaks are these, you know, almost, if you're an investigative journalist, the Gupta leaks are sort of like a dream scenario, because you have literally one of the key players in the whole Gupta enterprise, which is Ashley Chawla, who was effectively running it on a day-to-day basis. You have all of his emails over a period of 4 years, which is just the most phenomenal trove of information. Now, I think we would have uncovered some of the criminality without the Gupta leaks, but what the Gupta leaks gave us was this incredible roadmap to basically go out into the rest of the world and subpoena documents and get documents and verify what was in the Gupta leaks. And I think without them, we would still very much be in the dark.
You suggested in your testimony, if I recall, that the contracts that the Gupta-linked companies were the total value, in other words, of the money that they got was around 57 billion rand. How did you come to that total?
So what we did was we tried to identify I should say when people quote this figure, I want to make it very clear this is just in relation to the Gupta enterprise. I know the Commission's looked at other cases of state capture like process. These figures don't figure into that. There was a contracts team at the Commission, and their job over a number of years was to effectively go to every government department in the country and try and locate contracts that had been awarded where the Guptas had benefited. That was all put into a central database, and then we just went through the process of identifying the money flows as far as possible, getting bank statements, verifying how much had been paid, and then putting it all together. You know, what I will say is I think we got a lot of the contracts. We excluded certain contracts from those figures where because the record keeping was so poor, we actually had no idea whether they were irregular or not, so we just left them out altogether. But I still think there's probably more expenditure that we don't know about. So it's probably over 57 billion rand.
Did the Guptas get to keep all of that? I mean, I presume they got to keep quite a lot of it. They got a lot of it out of the country before the banks stopped them.
Sure. So the figure that I worked out was that, so when I say that the figure of 57 billion rand, that's the total cost to the state of making payments in contracts related to the Guptas. And of that amount, an amount of 16.217 billion rand was traced going to the Guptas, both onshore and offshore, but largely offshore.
It's a huge amount of money, 16 billion rand. I mean, even converting that into dollars, it's a huge amount of money. The report is long. There's a lot to go through. Are there things you think were missed, or perhaps areas that needed more emphasis or more attention?
Sure. I mean, I think, first of all, I should say that I think I've been involved in 2 commissions of inquiry in my life. One was the Siriti Commission and one was this commission. And they are chalk and cheese in terms of the work that they did and the effort that was put in and the investigations they did. And the Zondo Commission is a pretty remarkable piece of work. Where my concern lies is that there is no focused attention placed on the role of enablers in state capture, and almost nothing about the international companies that paid the bribes and won the contracts. They're sort of mentioned in passing, but there's nothing stated, there's no recommendations around how to deal with those sort of companies. I would have liked to have seen a much more focused discussion about the role of the banks in state capture. We have one part of the report that discusses whether it was legitimate for the banks to shut down the Guptas accounts. And I think that the Commission missed the trick there. I think they should have extended that discussion. They should have said, the work we did with the Commission identified this enormous money laundering network in South Africa. When I looked at those bank statements, the money laundering was painfully obvious. I really struggle to believe that if the bank was doing its job, it wouldn't have identified it. So the question has to be, I think, really powerfully, what are the banks doing in particular to stop money laundering? And what could be done in future to prevent that money laundering from happening? And I think, a much more focused discussion on enablers would be very useful. As I was saying to somebody just before this call, the report is very good at grappling with the South African state and the South African bureaucracy and makes very powerful recommendations around that. But I don't think it really captures the entire ecosystem that's required for corruption on this scale to take place. So it doesn't capture the enablers, it doesn't capture the European and other companies that benefited from it. And I think you have to see all of those together in order to get a very holistic view of state capture.
And the recommendations to stop this from happening again, and I mean, there are many of them, and I think our sort of view of them is going to change over the next few weeks. Everyone's focusing for the moment on the direct election of a president. I don't know if that would do it. People are focusing on the weaknesses of Parliament. Do those recommendations go far enough?
I mean, they're quite a mixed bag of recommendations. I mean, there's certain recommendations I actually actively disagree with, and certain ones that I think are very powerful. The Commission has had to grapple with this very real problem that at the heart of our political system and our constitutional architecture is a lack of accountability. That you can have a system that creates the space for a Zuma presidency, which the Commission is incredibly damning of, but it's unaccountable, it's untransparent, it's highly corrupt, it's captured, and that flows from the political architecture that we've established. I think there's certain very useful things, like they've recommended the revisiting of the Van-Zyl-Slabbert report, which is a very old report. You have to go back 19 years to have a look at it. But that was basically saying, we have a PR system that has its benefits, but there also is some need for some sort of constituency-based system. I think there's a real sense that there needs to be some way of creating an architecture that provides more checks and balances that we have right now. And what I do like is that there is a sense that we need to elect the president, and we need to make the president less powerful. And I think that's a very important thing to take away from it. Yeah.
So much more to talk about. Paul Holden from Shadow World Investigations. Thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. Such important work being done there on the tracing of the money.